Welcome back to another episode of Ute Dash here on Dash Sports TV. I'm your host for today's show, Cole Bagley, the assistant sports editor at the Daily Utah Chronicle. I am joined, as always, by Sammy, Mora, the editor of the sports desk on the Daily Utah Chronicle. Sammy, we got Utah football, but it wasn't exactly what we were hoping for. But what'd you think?
I'm tired, first and foremost. I got home late from the stadium last night, but it was worth it. It was good to be back up at Rice Eccles. It was kind of weird to be there with no fans. Saw our good bud Nathan of Trojan Dash. Had some conversation with him, but there's a lot to break down with this game. So do we want to just jump into the good first?
Yeah, I mean, let's just follow kind of the fashion of how last night's game went. It started off pretty good, so let's just start off pretty good, and we'll kind of spiral out of control, but it's fine.
Nice. Okay, so for me, there's two good things. There's one on the offense and there's one on the defense. My good on the offense is Ty Jordan. The freshman showed a lot of flashes of what he can do. And he had one rush for 13 yards and he had a catch for 21 yards. And I think Utah fans should be really excited for him because I think that they're going to use him in kind of a Britton Covey-esque type role, if that makes sense, especially because Covey was out last night. He has the potential to be really good, whether it be from the backfield or catching stuff out of the flat. I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, I really liked his performance. Coach Witt said in the post-game press conference that he really gave them a spark early on, and I felt like that too. I think he had like a sweep play where he was able to get a first down and run a couple guys over for a few extra yards. I think it gave him like 13, 14 yards on the play. And then he caught a couple passes and did a couple other things. So he is kind of an unexpected a welcome. Well, I welcome him. He is unexpected and words are hard, but I'm tired because last night we were up super late. But yeah, he was great. And I think one of the best things that happened last night, if you can say that it was necessarily good, was the committee of running backs. Jordan Wilmore, Devin Brumfield, Ty Jordan. They combined for 22 carries and 98 yards. So not fantastic, but if you had one of those guys doing that.
Not the production level we expected from the Utah running backs, but it was still good to see that they were able to get some stuff done on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, if you had just one of those guys running for 98 yards, that would be, suffice. That would suffice. That would be well done. So, yeah, Ty Jordan even had a few Moss-like plays. I'd say he ran over several defenders, picked up some extra yards. So I hope to see more of him. I hope that we're able to see him maybe getting a few more minutes than potentially Jordan Wilmore, Devin Brumfield next time Utah plays. And Coach Witt even mentioned that in the press conference. He said, until one of these guys stands out, all four of them are going to continue to run the football. And he said, if that's how it goes the rest of the season, that's how it'll go.
That's how it's going to go. What Witt says, Witt does. So, let's talk about the defense. So there was some good on this defense. Let's not say there wasn't anything good that happened in this Utah defense, but I had two shining stars on that Utah defense, and it was our linebacking core, Nephi Sewell and Devin Lloyd. So before the season started, we were not worried, but we just didn't know what was going to happen with the linebacking core because we had Devin, but we didn't know who was going to be lining up next to Devin. And when Nephi kind of came into the scene, everyone was kind of like, how's that going to work and stuff. He killed it. He killed it. Like, so good. He was everywhere. He had 10 tackles. And then he had the scoop and score, and he had an interception. Very, very, very good for Nephi, and I enjoyed watching him play last night.
Yeah, so the word I was looking for earlier with Ty Jordan is an unexpected surprise, and I'd say Nephi was the exact same thing. Sam, to be honest, I didn't even know who he was really coming in. Didn't have a lot of information on him, didn't know who he was. And ironically, kind of just going back, I was most worried about the defense going into the season and into this game. 5 freshmen saw time on that side of the ball, and 3 of them were in the secondary. I mean, I know they allowed 33 points, 264 yards, but if I'm remembering correctly, I think the Utah defense only had one series that US scored on a complete drive against Utah's defense, meaning that it wasn't a turnover that put the defense in a bad position. I think it was, Utah punted, and
it was probably a really bad punt, which we'll talk about later.
Yes, Utah punted, and USC drove the ball down the field. There's a couple busted plays, some bad coverage, but I mean, to only give up one pass, really one series where USC marches down the whole field and scores on you, I was impressed by that. I'm not going to put the other touchdowns on the defense, because when the offense gives up the ball inside your own red zone, what's the defense really going to do? Especially, I think the fumble was recovered on like the 6-yard line.
Yeah, it was like inside the 5. It was not good. And then Rising got hurt on that too. It was just a mess. But I want to also talk about Devin Lloyd for a hot second. It's not surprising that he led the team in tackles with 11, but it was just really good to see him out there and just doing what he does. It was really nice. I love watching Devin play. I think he has a very bright future. I think he's going to be in the NFL someday. And I love Devin Lloyd. Like, him wearing the number 0 just makes my heart just happy, just because I love number 0 for jerseys. So that's cool. But I also want to give a quick honorable mention of the defensive line for Utah. They looked pretty good at times. Devin Kafusi was the one who had the strip sack on Slovis that led to Sewell's scoop and score. The defensive line looked really good at times. Xavier Carlton, our true freshman, was out there a couple times. He whiffed a couple of times, but he also had some big tackles. So I think overall, like, the areas that I was expecting, there was some good, even though, like, it's kind of like you kind of just don't want to look at the good on this game, especially because of how hard it was and how rough it was. There's still a lot of things that Utah fans can be proud of and think and be like, oh yeah, that's going to be good for the future, because you have a good set of running backs. Your defensive line shows potential. Your linebacking core looks like there's not going to be any drop off from last season. So I think that's fine. I think there's good, as much as we don't want to acknowledge it at times.
Yeah, and the mistakes were just, I think, mostly, like, if there was a theme, it would be just inexperience. A couple busted coverage plays where I think the defender just lost the receiver. And Witt even said, like, this is probably the best receiving core in the Pac-12.
Yeah,
I'd have to agree with that. Potentially the best quarterback in the Pac-12. Yeah, it's a hot take, and I think he's at least up there. I think it's between him and whoever you're thinking, Sammy. But I think Slovis is pretty good.
Slovis is good, but I don't think he's not my fave in the conference.
Yeah, but
the jury's still out for me on that, because there's still, I don't know what's going on at this point. True,
but I mean, I'll give it up for the Utah defense. I was really impressed. The how many freshmen were out there taking reps, and they did pretty well. And so, and there's one more thing I kind of want to cover and address before we move on to the next topic. And it seems to happen every year, Sammy. You know this. When we have a bad loss, a bad game, everybody, all the Ute fans sound the alarm, and it's fire the coaches, fire Witt. He's been around too long. Get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Do we not realize that in college football, you have a ton of turnover? So much turnover. It's not like the NFL where you can keep a star player.
Yeah, and when you can sign them to a contract. These kids are here for 4 to 5 years, depending on even 3. Look at Jalen Johnson, who's here for 3.
Some of the best players are only there for 2 to 3 years, and you're lucky to hang on to players like Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss as long as we did. But then when they leave, you have to rebuild. And that's okay. And I think a coach should be judged on how well he rebuilds. You're going to have years like what I expect this year to be after seeing these guys play, where you lost your starting quarterback, you lost your starting running back, you lost, I believe, 9 starters on the defensive end, and most of them went to the NFL. When you lose that core, which the Utah defense was the strength, the the biggest contributing factor, in my opinion, to wins last year, you're going to struggle. And you know what? You hang on for the ride, you commit, and you see what the coaching staff can do. I think you judge the coach on how quickly they bounce back when they lose. If it's 5-6 years of garbage, sure, then you can start saying, okay, call it, this guy's done. But if it's 1 season or 2 seasons, come on, guys, give the guy a break.
I will add this before we jump on to the next topic. Scott in the comments said that our defense killed it. Yes, Scott, they had the good moment. They had some good moments, but there's also some not so great moments. But I think a lot of Utah fans were aware heading into the season that this was going to be a rebuilding season. Like, not even a rebuilding, a reloading, as the team says. It's a reload season because you lost 9 players on that defense. You lost your starting quarterback. You lost your starting running back. You lost an offensive lineman. You lost a wide receiver. But I think also you got to realize that Utah hadn't played a game up to this point. USC had played 2. Also, we are coming off of COVID. Like, we still don't know who was affected. I will mention, so Porter Larson of ESPN 700 did say that, Scott, actually, I just found out you're a USC fan. Your defense did kill it. So good. You guys did good. But but I lost my train of thought there for a hot second. But Porter Larson of ESPN 700 did say that the offensive line was one of the groups that was most decimated by COVID, and it was kind of evident last night. So actually, this leads into the second topic. So let's just get onto that one.
Well, just kind of transitioning how the team did last night. It went from the first series good to pretty bad pretty quickly. So Sammy, what happened?
Okay, so my bad is the Utah secondary. And it's not like they were bad the whole time, okay? When they were playing in zone, they looked really good, and they looked good. Like, there was some missed tackles and some busted coverage when they played zone, but it wasn't as bad as when they switched to man. When they switched to man, that's when things went south, and it was not good. I will give them props. It did look like it was their first game, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. They get bonus points from me because no USC wide receiver finished the day with over 100 yards. So that's good on them. Good on this young Utah secondary for that. Clark had some good moments. Sione Fotu had that huge pass breakup inside like the red zone that only led to a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna be a star at Utah. He is going to be a star. And that was like my biggest issue last night, was just like, we knew there was going to be some issues with the secondary, but it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be, is what I will say.
Yeah, I mean, the first half I was impressed with the run defense. I think we only allowed like 39 yards in the first half. That broke up a little bit into the second half. But yeah, I mean, the secondary played pretty much to my expectation, and they weren't good. They did give up 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Slovis did go 24 for 35, which is pretty dang good.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about earlier, it doesn't really come as a surprise. The defense lost 9 starters. They lost Julian Blackman, Jalen Johnson, solid defenders, and they also lost some of their pass rushers in Bradley and Francis Bernard. So when you don't have guys that are getting into the backfield, that are pressuring the quarterback, that are making him roll out and make a rash decision, and then you also don't have those guys that are not going to let anything over their heads, it's a weird feeling, Sammy. It really is to go from last year's team where every time the defense stepped out there, I was like, this is going to be fine. We're good. I'm not worried. We're getting the ball right back. And obviously that wasn't always true, but they were fantastic, and I never worried about giving up big plays. Teams last year really had to earn it against the Utah defense. And it's just not the case. But again, like we talked about, it comes from the reload. It comes from the roster turnover. And I will say they are looking good for the future. There will be, especially with some of the recruits that we've signed on and stuff, the future looks bright, but this year it's going to be a struggle.
In 2 years, this Utah defense will be back to, even possibly next year. I just think you got to get these young kids these reps. Like, at this point, we don't know how many games Utah's going to play. Like, our game versus Arizona State got shifted to Sunday, which is, I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign or no sign. But at the same time, you want to get as many reps into these kids as possible. And as much as it sucked that we started the season versus USC, I think it's really good because they got a taste of what the Pac-12 is like on day one, right off the bat. And like we've said, like USC has probably the most talented wide receiver core in the conference. You're lining up against like huge, like giant wide receivers and fast ones at that. Like Witt said in his presser that like sometimes they were oversized. Like there was weird matchups between your corner and your wide receiver because of height difference and size difference and stuff like that. And I think really good that they like. I hated that we played USC first because I was like, oh god, I have a feeling this isn't going to end well. But at the end of the day, it's team fun. That's what everyone on Utah Twitter says. It's team fun. This is what this year is going to be for us. It's just team fun, getting these kids these reps, getting this experience, and just getting ready for next season at this point.
Well, that's the most valuable thing at this point for that young defense is just experience. It's getting reps. It's being out on the field. And unfortunately, that only comes a week at a time. And unfortunately, this season, they might only get 3 or 4 experiences if we're lucky. And so it's making the most of it. And as a fan or supporter, whatever you may be, it's recognizing that. It's realizing we're not going to be going back to the Pac-12 championship game this year. We're not going to be running it back as Pac-12 South champions, and that's okay. There's a time in a season for everything. You're not going to win every year, but like I touched on earlier, give this team time to bounce back. You can't expect to lose as many starters as we did, as many players as we did to the NFL, and then to run it back and to be like, oh yeah, we're just as good. I think
this year, we will be back to the Pac-12 championship. Like that is something that I'm very confident in saying. It's not going to be this year. Like I am fully well accepting that it's not going to be this year. It might. We don't even know. It could be next year, depending on how many games these kids play and how much reps they get. Because Utah has the talent, they just don't have the experience. And I think in this, especially in the Pac-12, experience is everything because you're playing against USCs and Oregons and UCLAs and Arizona States and these schools that are known for producing these high caliber NFL players and are able to lock in these 4- and 5-star recruits. So with everything, it's experience. That's what it is.
Well, and the college game is so different from high school. I mean, you could even throw out there a 4 or 5-star safety or corner, and as you progress to each level, you have to become more crafty. You have to become trickier and better and stronger and faster. And especially when you come from the high school game, you could be playing kids that are only on the team because the team needs a certain amount of kids on their roster in order to have a team. Whereas USC,
you could be playing kids who just want to play with their friends.
Right. And, their wide receiver is 5'6" and weighs $125. But then you go up against a program like USC who can get a lot of the top recruits even in the nation, and they're 6'5" and weigh 220, and they're lightning fast. And so as bad as it wasn't ugly.
Until it was.
Right. But there was plenty of ugly. So let's go ahead and talk about our last topic of the day. What was ugly out there, Sammy?
You want me to start because this could go a while?
Go ahead. We got time.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with something that we briefly touched on, Utah's punting. Okay, here's the deal. Maybe we've been biased and maybe we've been blessed with the last 2 punters we've had with Mitch Wishnowsky and Tom Hackett, and they're
the goats of punting.
The goats of punting for Utah. But Ben Lennon just isn't it. Oh my gosh, it was so bad. His long was 46, and he was averaging 36 yards a punt. That's not good. And also all of his, I remember one of the punts, had like this terrible bounce back, and it gave USC like 5 or 6 yards. I shouldn't be nitpicking on punting, but
no, you should.
This was an issue last year too. This was an issue last year too, and it just hasn't been addressed. And it's like they took a chance with him, and it's not paying off. So I think we've given it a year. Let's move on to Jordan Noyes, and let's go to our second string punter.
Well, there was one, I don't remember when. I think it was third quarter, something like that. And Utah has forced a punt, and they had the ball on the 30-yard line, and he only got it to the 40 of the USC 40.
There was times he didn't even get it. We were in Utah. We would punt in our own territory, and he wouldn't even get it across midfield.
And it's like, okay, I understand that punting is just a different ball game, you know, and there's not as many punters to choose from as there are quarterbacks and running backs and, you know, defensive backs and safeties and all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, did this guy just walk into the locker room, put on a uniform, and was like, hey, I kick the balls around here? Like he just was terrible. I think I've seen more high school punters that can kick further and would have done a better job. And you just, again, you can't. I just felt like the theme last night is Utah was continually setting themselves up for failure. If it wasn't a turnover,
it was a bad
punt.
And not
that's
gonna
why
lie,
you can't blame the defense as much as maybe some people would.
Yeah, and it's like, yes, punting's a hard game. He also almost had one blocked, which was a common theme last year too. So, because he holds the ball for too long.
There was 4 or 5 that it was close.
I digress about punting. Well, we can have a whole episode. We can have a whole episode. Just talk about punting for a whole episode because I can't. My other ugly is the quarterbacks.
Oof.
Okay, let's collectively take a deep breath.
We have to start this.
Let it out. Here's the thing. Rising looked good until he didn't. After he threw that
30 seconds.
I would give him a little bit longer.
Okay, 45.
After he threw that interception, that like where he clearly overthrew Ty Jordan, he's kind of short. He couldn't jump and get it. And Drake Jackson, I'm pretty sure, Drake London. Yeah. They're a really good defensive player. He grabbed it, and that was the beginning of the end for Rising, in my opinion. And then the following series, he gets strip sacked, he hurts his shoulder, he's out. Okay. Rising had some good moments. He did. He had a couple of good balls up until his injury. But at the same time, I'm just like, dude, you clearly overthrew your running back. You know how tall he is. Be aware of that. But here's the other thing. Bentley, okay, yes, he was thrown into the moment. And we usually know that when a quarterback is thrown into a moment and thrown into the game, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really end well. And yes, he should have been, like, he has the SEC experience and stuff like that and blah, blah, blah. It didn't look like he had the SEC experience last night. And I'm gonna throw this out here. Utah isn't USC. This isn't the same. Like, Utah couldn't do what USC did to Utah last year with Matt Finken just chucking it up and hoping his wide receivers would come down with it. Because that's what both of his interceptions to me felt like, is he was just chucking it just to get rid of it. Don't do that. Like, he had a 33-yard rush. Also just throw the ball out of bounds. Throw it away. I would rather us be put in a 2nd and 10 or a 3rd and 10 situation rather than you throwing the ball in an interception and giving it back to USC, who we didn't have answers for last night. But along with that, Utah was playing 3 freshmen on their offensive line last night. So it's not 100% on Bentley or Rising, but it also is on that offensive line, because Porter Larson of ESPN 700 mentioned on Twitter that the offensive line was one of the groups that was decimated by COVID when we got hit with it. So you were playing 3 freshmen instead of 3 players who had the experience, and you were lining up against USC with a very stout defensive line. And I don't think that works. that did not work well, and it did not work in our favor. But the last thing that was ugly was just playing a game post-COVID. That's the big elephant in the room right now, I feel, is we knew that the first game wasn't going to be fun, but I didn't think it was going to be this magnitude. Because players, like, even though they're out of quarantine and stuff like that and they're testing negative, they're still feeling after effects of this. So you don't know if they're actually fully 100%.
Right. Well, I just could not believe how it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse and worse as the night went on. But when you commit 5 turnovers, you are not going to win a game.
No.
The 3 interceptions were just poor decisions on that of the quarterbacks. Bentley kept throwing into double coverage, and it was driving me nuts.
Because they were double covering Keithy.
And it's like, what did you see? What were you looking at down there that made you think this is a good idea? I can understand if it's one-on-one down the field and you just want to take a shot. There's probably not a great chance that ball is going to get picked off because you're either going to overthrow or underthrow or somebody's going to knock the ball down. But when it is double coverage, and it wasn't even close, both the interceptions, it was like, who are you throwing to?
That's
and
the last. Okay,
one,
I will. Here's his second interception. I will say it was the last play of the game, so it wasn't like
he threw into like triple coverage.
He threw into triple coverage in that moment, but like at that point, we all knew the game was over.
Yeah.
So I was like, whatever. If that one's, I'm not really counting that one as like ooh.
It wasn't costly. The game was already over.
Costly, yeah. But the one, the double coverage.
That was just ugly. So
it was painful.
Yeah, Bentley just looked rusty. It's like he hasn't played football in a couple of years, and
he hasn't.
Right? And it was very telling last night. And it's difficult because looking at some of his numbers, they were pretty dang good when he was at South Carolina, but just looked so bad, and you could tell clearly that he has very little chemistry with any of those receivers.
But also, he wasn't taking the reps with the ones this week.
True.
This week, he probably will be. So maybe things will be different this week.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's just like how much – there's only so much he can do.
Yeah. And then my thoughts on Rising are, I was on the Bentley train the entire offseason. I really thought it was going to be him. Well, yeah. I mean, you bring in an SEC transfer, and he's a senior. Why would he commit if he's not going to play? But going beyond that, once I found out it was Rising, and we have kind of thought that it was going to be Rising for a couple weeks until it was truly confirmed. What excited me was, okay, Rising must be dang good because he beat out an SEC transfer quarterback with a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. And he did look good in that first drive. I was really impressed. I was like, okay, I'm not worried. He's going to be good. He's young. We're going to have him for a couple years. This should be great. And then his nerves kind of started to take over. He overthrew on that interception, fumbled, he got hurt, and I don't know when he's coming back.
We'll don't know.
Yeah. But continuing and just trying to wrap things up here a little bit. Overall, the quarterback situation makes me really nervous for the Utes going forward. Bentley was 16-28, had 171 yards. As we touched on before, continuously missing his targets, overthrowing, throwing into double coverage, 2 interceptions. But with that injury, he's probably the guy going forward. Now, the last thing I want to point out really quickly, which I thought was hideous, is our top receivers didn't see enough of the ball. Thompson, 2 receptions for 48 yards. Ennis, 3 receptions for 42 yards. Nakua, 3 for 29. And Keithy, 4 for 23 yards. Are you kidding me?
You need to get the ball.
You need to disrespecting my man and not giving him the football.
You need to get the ball in Keithy's hands. You need to get the ball in Keithy's hands. You need to get the ball in Kincaid's hands. You need to get the ball in Thompson's hands, and you need to get the ball in Nakua's hands. So Solo looked really good last night. I will say that Solo looked really good, and I am excited to see what he does this season.
And I did notice I felt like they were double teaming Keithy,
which was leaving people open.
Yeah, it was,
and they didn't.
And, with the amount of turnovers and interceptions, it's going to limit your offensive possession. But interestingly enough, looking at the amount of time, it was like the Trojans had like 30 minutes of possession with like a handful of seconds, and then obviously that left the other for the Utes. It was like less than a minute difference.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because we
just
were
kept giving
rushing
the
too
ball back.
much. We were we were leaning on the run game.
Yeah. So overall, Sammy, Utah football was back. I'll take it.
It was messy.
It was messy, but we expected it to be messy. We talked about that several times. The good, the bad, the ugly. Take it for what you will. Take it for what you want. Let's just focus on the good, and let's hope that next week we're playing ASU on Sunday.
Let's hope we're playing.
I don't know that we will, but let's hope we are. But unfortunately, guys, that is all the time we have for today. We want to thank everyone for following us today here on Ute Dash. Just a reminder, we have collaborated with Sports Pack 12. We can find shows, articles, lots of good content. Be sure to follow them at Sports Pack 12 and on their website, sportspack12.com. In addition, please don't forget to check us out on dashsports.tv. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at dashsportstv. Thanks again. Sammy, thank you. Hopefully, again, we'll be seeing some more Utah football and some better Utah football. But as always, Sammy, go Utes.
Go Utes, guys.